Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anush Desai, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. On today's show, we have Sébastien Béguerie, who is founder of Kanavape, Alphacat, and Golden Buds, a busy guy indeed. Sébastien, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very good, Anush. Thank you for having me in your podcast.
No, real pleasure. As I said, you're a busy man. You've got lots of different enterprises, so we'll get on to talk a bit about what those are in a minute. But we usually like to start with a bit about you personally. Maybe if you can introduce yourself and tell us about how and why you got into the wonderful world of cannabis.
Okay. Well, actually, kind of started at young age because I'm from Marseille, the south of France, and we are kind of Californian vibes in the meaning that we are by the sea. A lot of skateboard culture, this kind of culture, and of course we have a lot of reggae music as well. And through my teenage time, listening to Bob Marley and especially Peter Tosh while smoking joint as a youth, I was very, very intriguing by the lyrics of Peter Tosh when he was talking about that cannabis is healing cancer, asthma, glaucoma, multiple sclerosis, and you name it. I was like, how is it possible? So from that perspective, I started to look for myself, and then I found out that actually cannabis do have some property for medical use. There have been science behind. And on top of it, as I also in Marseille, we have our main street. It's called Canebière. Canebière in the local dialect, it means the hemp field. Literally, like Caneb, it means the hemp, and hier, it means the area. So there was the area where there was the cannabis, basically. So long story short, so through my culture, I was like, what is with this cannabis plant? Like I have the main street is named after it. This Rasta man saying it's a healing of the nation. So I'm like, okay, so as I developed my study, I went into science, and then I jumped into a master in plant science, which I did in the Netherlands. And that was in 2008. And during that study, I had the chance to get sponsored by Bedrocan, because through my previous curriculum during a bachelor, which I also did in the Netherlands, I worked in a famous agricultural institute with Dr. Gianpaolo Grassi, and there I met the people of Bedrocan, and then after, the story made that they were very keen to sponsor me, and so for 2 years I was lucky to work with Bedrocan at their early stage. And as I continue along during my study, that's when I first start to use what became after Alphacat. So it was like the premise, like was linear chromatography analysis protocol, which was handy during my thesis because I was looking at the cannabinoid profiles in the plant and I wanted to monitor during the growth. But I wanted to have like a real time. I didn't want to wait 2 weeks in time to see where the harvest time should be. So I came across this method, which I thought was very interesting. So later on, I kind of democratized it by put it into a kit shape and offering to the people by selling it. And that was in 2012. And in parallel, as I was working with Bedrocan and involved in the scientific community of cannabinoids through the conference of IACM, the International Association for Cannabinoid Medicine, where I met Professor Meshula, Etienne Rousseau, some big names. Was really like, wow. Especially when I was a young age, I was like 20, 25, something like this. It was really an amazing experience. And they were starting to talk about CBD. Like, yeah, CBD this, CBD that. And the good thing is that it was not illegal because there was no statute on it. Like whether it's regulated or not, there was nothing on it. It was just the beginning. So when I finished my master, I basically first started to create this test kits. And as I went back to Marseille, I also decided to start my own CBD cultivation. So in 2013, I made my first hemp flower field in the Parc of Luberon. It's like a national reserve park in south of Provence, basically. And there I grow like 5,000 meters square, harvest flowers. and I found a lab in Czech Republic that I could actually do the extractions for me. And that's how I started to get into the formulation of CBD products. So in 2014, I had my first prototype of what we call today CBD oil and CBD capsules. But back in the days, I was doing it with dry materials. So I was just doing a decarbox of the flowers and then piling it up into capsules, like old school herbalist. And it worked. As I also created the first medical cannabis association in France in 2012, the UFCM. I care, and that's actually why I started to be more into the CBD, because a lot of patients was requesting cannabinoids. Of course, she was out of questions officially, so I was like, well, why not at least provide them something with CBD? So that's how I start my journey with CBD. And as with the test kit, getting closer to producer and to regulator, it was easy to kind of see it through. And so in 2014, after the first extraction of my field, I decided to make another product, which became after Kanavape. It's pre-filled cartridges with CBD and terpenes. And this concept was inspired for me by my collaborator that I had in the US back in the days, who were using my cannabinoid test kit in Seattle. And they happened that they were actually the extractor lab for Open Vape. I don't know if you remember Open Vape. Now they are not that big anymore, but in 2012, they were huge. They came up with the first brand of THC vape pen from Colorado, and then their business model was to have like a lab in each legal state to operate their product. So my US partner in Seattle was one of their partners, and he introduced me to that concept of the pre-filled cartridges. I was like, wow, this is amazing, and I want to do this with CBD. But the technology was not there, so we didn't have like those nice extracts that we can have today with CBD that you can vape directly. So I ended up finding another way, which was more closer to the e-liquid, so PG-VG and CBD isolate with some essential oil of mint for the Moroccan mint that we had, and the essential oil of the hemp to give the cannabis terpenes. So that's how I came about Kanavape. Unfortunately, I was too much ahead of my time, as I wanted to make an impact with a national launch in 2014, December 2014. And it was directly associated with e-joint, and the politician start to see it as a way to promote the use of cannabis. France is completely illegal. I mean, even to have a T-shirt with a cannabis leaves, you can get a fine for it. Yeah, so I got into trouble quite soon, early in my entrepreneur journey, but I didn't let go. As Bob Marley said, fight for your rights. So that's what I did. And because in February 2015, I had the visit of the police in my company in Marseille. It was like big operation. They came with the machine guns, dogs, 10 cops there. It was quite massive, 5 o'clock in the morning. They brought me to the police station for interrogation for 20 hours. And that was quite exhausting a moment, but I went through. And from there, I said, okay, I love my country, but they don't love me, so why should I bother? And I moved to Czech Republic, where I had my extraction labs, my collaborator there. And naturally, I start to continue the activity there, which, by the way, at the early beginning, the plan was to produce in Czech Republic. So it was not that big move. It was just a big move personally, because then I have to move out, take an apartment in Prague, and rebuild my life, meet people and friends. But it's a friendly city, so it was not too difficult. So that was for the genesis of Kanavape. In parallel, so as I say, I made my I was a founding member of the first medical cannabis patient for French people, which developed into education platform, where since 2012 until 2019, we were organizing annual conferences internationally at the Faculty of Medicine in Strasbourg, the Faculty of Pharmacy in Strasbourg, and then after, for the last year, we did it at the University Hospital in Paris. And we invited Dr. Grotenerman, Professor Meshulam, Professor Anoush, Dr. Etanonso. I mean, I managed to get the big names coming to France to give the good information, because in France, doctors were very ignorant, as a majority of the case over the world. Actually, it's not just France. But in France, we have a very strong pharmaceutical lobbyist, and as well, the prohibition created some urban myths that cannabis is the devil, and the scaling on drugs by starting with cannabis. So by showing the scientific data, we kind of open up the discussion. And actually, after all those conferences in 2018, at the French National Medicine Agency, that allow which medicine will be sold on the French market or which one will be banned, decided to create a commission to discuss about medical cannabis and the potentiality of using it to see if it could be used. And after like 3 years, so actually 2 months ago, in March 2021, was launched the first experiment in France. So they made the first prescription in last March of medical cannabis to a patient. Even so, it's not the ideal format that they choose. It's still a start, because basically it's an experiment on a 2 years basis with only 5,000 patients and only 5 pathology, but very, very narrowed down to a point that even if you have the pathologies that they mention, they still need to check that you don't have any heart failure, you don't have any depression symptom or any psychiatric, it's very drastic. So that's being said. The medical cannabis is happening in France, was part of that movement. I'm still in a way. And then on the side, so the Kanavape started the big movement of CBD in France, but actually kind of kick it as well around Europe. And in November 2019, because basically it was a 7 years trial, it's not finished yet. But the point is that we had the first sentences in 2016 saying we were guilty. They gave me 18 months of jail suspension, 10,000 euros of fine, to make a national announcement to say that Kanavape is not what people think it is, or blah, blah, blah. So, of course, I made an appeal. On that appeal, my lawyer, so in 2017, my lawyer asked the judge to request the advisory of the European Court of Justice, because there was no law according to CBD specifically. So the judge felt like he was powerless and he didn't want to make the bad decision. So he had the guts and the courage to actually go for it. Big respect to the judge, by the way. And so we went to the European Court of Justice. And in 2019, November, I went to Luxembourg. And this time, we put upfront the fact that CBD product is a merchandise. So as long as it's legal in the origin country, it can be sold in other member states through the Schengen Declaration. And the judge actually approved that argument, saying, yeah, that's right. So actually France is infringing the Schengen Declaration, which is a big thing. And the France can actually have sanction over that. And I think, and so in 2020, so like 8 months ago, November, the announcement came, was big boom all over Europe. All the CBD industry and player kind of see finally the way to get our industry legit, which I'm super proud and super happy for. And actually, in Czech Republic, the neighbor is Slovakia. They had CBD illegal, so it was officially illegal CBD there. And since the judgment of November, so last month, Slovakia legalized CBD.
Wow! What a story, man! That's huge. And thank you for doing that, because obviously, we're all interested in and keen on having a successful CBD industry as well as other cannabinoids. So thank you. That was very brave of you, though. That must have been quite traumatic to have to go through that.
brave and how to say, I was young, you know. So when you are young, you don't see all the risk in the same way, and and I didn't have much to lose. Well, actually, I could have lose big, but turned out good for me. I spent a lot of money on lawyers and procedures, but I'm quite happy. Yeah, and especially to see that because I started, as I explained, I started from patient. You know, I have a master in plant science, so I'm a scientist. Even so, today my day-to-day work is purely business and management. I do have some research development on the side, but it's 20% of my time. So I'm super happy that finally the plant can be recognized for what it is for. You know.
Yeah, that is brilliant, and yeah, it's well deserved that you're kind of getting the recognition for opening a door for people, I think. And so, look, we're the main topic of the interview is going to be about testing and quality control. But before we get onto that, maybe we just talk a little bit about Alphacat, because that's obviously quite relevant to this. So what is it? When you say it's a testing kit, does that mean that anyone can have it in their home type thing?
Exactly. So just to finish on the face, because maybe people will ask, well, where can I buy Kanavape, you know? So the story is that because of my trial, I decided to hold on with the Kanavape, even so I own the trademark and it's ready to be relaunched. I'm just waiting for the final decision to the court. And in the meantime, because it's kind of going in my favor, I actually came back with the original concept, but with a new, like 2.0 Kanavape. It's called Golden Buds. And this is the original concept, meaning that there's no PG, no VG. It's the pure extract form, 50% CBD, 10% CBG, and the cannabis terpenes. So we get the OG Kush, gelato, Girl Scout cookies. So it's really the pure vape experience like we can have in the US for people who are vaping THC cartridges, for example. So it's there. So if you want an alternative right now, it's the Golden Buds until I come back with the Kanavape. So as I make a pause on Kanavape, I kind of went back to my original project, which was Alphacat. And through the testing, I also put out a small range of products with CBD. So, but I focus it more on the wellness, so the oils and capsules and the cosmetics. And I was able to do that through my test kits, especially the formulation of oils, because at that time I could get good extract, but I could not get all the labs and it was super expensive. Like back in the days, I was paying an analysis for like 300 euros, you know. So if I had to test all my batch when I was doing the development, was like insane. So of course I did my test only at the final product, but in between to adjust it, I was using my kit. And basically the kit, it's aimed for anybody who are dealing with cannabinoids. It can be from professionals to physician, pharmacist, to the patient or to the regular user, you know. So in that context, I was also super proud to help a lot of patient association, especially in the UK. Also, a lot of customers in the UK, as many people wants to buy I don't want to call this the spinning steels, the concentrates especially for cancer, that was promoted by some Canadian guys through a YouTube video. It was very popular in 2012, it really went viral. So everybody was looking for this extract to cure cancer, and many people were having scam in the product. So many times I had a situation where I had to ship super express the test kit so people could purchase the right product to test the right amount. And it was the same also in the CBD industry. 4 years ago, there is many ring testing that has been published, where you could see 20 different CBD products, and out of it, like 2 or 3 or sometimes more that doesn't have CBD at all. And for the best case scenario, there is CBD, but not at all to the concentration which it was advertised for, or what is it actually written on the label. So that's why with the kit I start to work with extractor, formulators, and growers as well. And then it came the waves of the CBD flower, which again was the story of the limitation of THC. Even so, on that side, I have to be honest that with my kits, we can detect anything above 1%, like with a level of a variation of 1 point. That means if you test with a conventional analytic method, let's say gas chromatography or HPLC, you will find a 1 point difference. So you will get a 10 with Alphacat, and you may find a 9 or 11 with another testing method. So that one's great. But people, of course, they all want to know if they are under 0.2. And also because it's super sensitive as basically it say, okay, you are legal or you are illegal. I didn't want also to put myself into that situation where I could, where my product could be part of more tempered discussion.
Yeah.
So, but I'm still working with growers for the compliance of CBD, because still there is a ratio that are proportional. So, for example, when you will see some CBD flower being announced for like 20% CBD, and they tell you it's 0.2, it's impossible, because the ratio is about 1 to 10, 1 to
Really?
15 at best case. But so that's also a way you can also understand. Even so, I'm not there to look at if you are under 0.2, if you're legal, but you can still find out by the amount of CBD what's going on in your cannabis that you purchase, you know. So the CBD is important. Also, a lot of players, they are faking the CBD content as well. As I just say, they say, yeah, it's 20% CBD, but you're like, yeah, but so either you are lying or you are not legal. So in that case, there is a problem.
Yes, well, that would never happen in the cannabis industry, I'm sure. Cool. Well, look, I'm just conscious of time, so let's talk about testing and quality control. So, Alphacat is clearly looking at the cannabinoid analysis, so the profile and the makeup of the cannabis, the product that you're buying, let's say. But what are some of the other tests that are involved in the quality control of cannabis products?
So the two main aspects, first of all, you have the active ingredients. So that's the one that will have property into the plant. So most known is the cannabinoids, of course. Then you have the terpenes, very important. And then we talk a little bit less, there is the flavonoids. And then there is, of course, some other secondary metabolites, but are in much less concentration in the plant. So it's cannabinoid, terpenes, flavonoids. So active ingredient, one part. And the other part is the contaminant. So when we look at the quality control of cannabis, we are really looking at those two parts. What are the effects? What's the property? And how safe is the product in terms of contamination, if it doesn't have any pesticide, heavy metal, fungi, bacteria. So that's the main contaminant, and those are the main active compounds.
Yeah, that's a really good way to sort of separate the two.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the methods that you use to sort of establish this?
So the most common methods, it's basically, there's two methods mainly in the labs. One is called gas chromatography. So we use a machine where the samples will be heating up at different temperature, from 0 to 300, even more, for depending on which compound you are interested in. And as the temperature rises up, different compound will evaporate from the sample. And the machine will actually detect what is coming out from those vapor. It will detect the molecular structure, so the weight of the molecules. And then you can refer to a database to match what molecules are this molecular weight. And from there, you will have the list on which you can, after, make sure which one is it. So that's the gas chromatography, so gas because of the vapor analysis. And then you have what we call the HPLC, so it's the high liquid pressure chromatography. So in this case, we don't evaporate the samples. We don't evaporate the active ingredients in the sample. We are diluting the active ingredient in the sample. So that means we are using solvents at different concentration, and so we start with a very small amount of solvent, and we increase. And as each amount of solvents, you will have different compound that will be diluted. So the smaller compound will be diluted with a smaller concentration of solvent, and the bigger compound will need much more solvents to be diluted. So that's how you can after detect it. And the same principle, you will find out which molecule came out in those different dilution. And by the way, for the gas chromatography, it's similar. So the more you heat up the samples, the bigger the molecule will be extracted. So the first one, for example, that come out usually are the terpenes, because the terpenes are very small molecule. So in the chromatography, it's usually it says terpenes, sesquiterpenes, and then cannabinoids.
Right. Brilliant. Thank you. That's a really good summary of how that all works. What are some of the challenges involved in this, in these sort of methods and the type of quality control? I didn't think it was easy.
No, it's a lot of headaches from different point of view. So let's say there's also two aspects, economical and technical. So economical, this is obvious. It costs a lot of money. One of those kind of machine, they cost the price of a Ferrari. We're talking about 200,000 euros, a brand new machine. Of course, you can make leasing, but on top of it, because they are complex machine, you require not just a regular technician, you will require an academic that operated with at least a master and at best and most recommended a PhD. And so, which also will be quite expensive to hire and pay. So that's just for the economical part. And then for the technical part, there is a lot of constraints. So the first constraint is to have the right protocol, because you have different type of way to actually try to measure your cannabinoids. So the challenge is to find the protocol which is recommended. So there is a few protocol recommended by the WHO or the UNODC, the United Nations of Office Drug and Crimes, but still it's not like an international standard, which is now I think it's a little bit more regulated, but in the US it was a massive issue. As you were operating with different lab, you go to 10 different lab, some sample, 10 different results. So that I think now it's a little bit better. It has improved since that time, but still it's not well obvious. One of the other technical issue is that in order to be able to quantify your active compound, especially THC, you need to put in the machine what we call an internal standard. So it's basically you need to put the pure THC inside the machine, of course diluted to a range that you will not overload the machine. But and this will give you the scale on how to measure what you actually have in your sample. So it's like it's the calibration, basically. It's your calibration of the machine to quantify your THC. So for the other one, CBG, those are legal cannabinoids. So usually it's not that big of a deal, even so it's expensive, but if you have the money, you can get it. But even if you have the money for THC, you need to also have the permit. And in the US, it was a big trouble, and I think it is even now, because you should have a federal license to obtain the license to push THC through the DEA, because it's a drug substance control, which nobody has in the US, by the way, because it's still illegal federally. So what they did is through some labs in different states, they managed to actually purify, extract to get pure THC, and that's how they are able to do the calibration today. But in Europe, for example, because in America, some of the states, you have the medical, you have the recreational, so like to even hold cannabis is not a big deal. So you can still do a little something. But in Europe, if you want to have a lab that deal with cannabis, you are not allowed of nothing. So even just to have a cannabis in your hand, now we have the CBD flower, so it's a little bit changing, but still you will need a license. Even normally for CBD flower in the lab, you will need a license.
Yeah, that's, we've talked about it a few times on the show, how difficult all of the legal status, basically, how difficult it makes, essential research. Cool. So as we come to the end of the show, I mean, you've got the perfect experience to kind of answer this. How hard is it to achieve consistent quality then, from your experience?
Actually, it's not that hard in the sense that if you handle your raw material and you have a proper source of supply, then in a sense, you should be able to have a steady, stable product. So the key is really to find the right supplier to make sure you get always the same product. And from there, you can actually operate and do your batch testing as always. But let's say the extract, it's always the same. So of course you receive a new batch, you go to the lab, so you can calibrate, okay, my batch is this month because it's always 2 or 3% cannabinoids difference from the previous, so to be on point. And after, for the rest, like I'm using MCT oil, olive oil, so I'm just trying to find the proper supplier. Well, commercial MCT oil, good quality you can find, and it's quite done on a manufacturer way, but I'm using also olive oil, and I'm using like extra virgin olive oil from Provence, which is kind of special product with special care. And the same, like I had to find a special producer in the heart of Provence to make sure he was able to, first of all, provide me the quality I want and the amount I want, because sometimes, it's very exclusive, so they won't have like a lot of liters and liters, so you can have something special. But I would say the key, it's the raw materials and, of course, the testing. So that means at every point of the production, you will do the testing. So for me, I do my test when I'm receiving my product, my extract. So even so I have the certificate of my supplier, I do my own because I'm working with my lab for all my analysis. So my standard is my lab. No, not the company, my lab, but you got me. So the point is to really be able to have a marker point on which you can focus and you can rely your data and build up from this. So I send my extract, I get my result. Okay, I got 80-something% CBD. I got my table with my calculation. I put 80%. I put what I want to produce, the amount. And then I got my number. And from there, I produce. I keep samples. I put one in quarantine to see also how it evolves in case I have a reclamation. And I send one to the lab to do my batch test. So that's basically the way I do it.
Yeah.
I believe it's the way it should be done. And but also one key point, so it's to handle your raw materials and also have very good relation with your lab, because one key is to have quick results. So if you are producing, you receive a new batch of raw materials. If you have to wait 1 month until you can actually process your materials, that means you will need to have always 1 month in advance your raw materials. So that means a lot of cash flow out. And so relation with the lab is also key.
Yes, really good advice there. So, you kind of calibrate it for yourself when you get it in, and then you go from there. So, yeah, thank you, Sébastien. This is brilliant. We could talk a lot more about this, actually, because testing is a huge topic. But I'm conscious of time and how busy you are. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
There's going to be lots of developments on your side, so we'd love to have you back on the show at some point.
Yeah, anytime. Actually, as I said, I'm planning to come back with Kanavape, so I think it would be also a good opportunity with that. And if any of your listeners are looking for a proper supplier of CBD product, branded or to produce their own, I'm also doing white label. So
get your sales pitch in. I like it.
Yes.
Cool. Thanks, Sébastien.
All right. Thank you, Anush. And have a good one. And thank you again for having me on your show.